Today, we're diving into a fascinating topic, cognitive bias. It's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but what does it really mean? At its core, cognitive bias refers to systematic errors in reasoning that occur when our subjective perception of reality skews our understanding of the world. It's like wearing glasses that slightly distort everything you see.
That's interesting. So, it's like when you're convinced that everyone at the party is having a better time than you just because you saw a couple of people laughing together?
Exactly. That's a great example. Cognitive biases can lead us to interpret situations in ways that aren't necessarily accurate. They play a significant role in decision-making, often without us even realizing it. Imagine you're a scientist trying to interpret data. If you're not aware of your own biases, you might only see the results that confirm what you already believe.
Wow, that sounds like it could lead to some pretty big mistakes. So, are these biases always bad, or do they serve a purpose?
Great question. While cognitive biases can lead to errors, they're actually rooted in mental shortcuts or heuristics that have evolved to help us make quick decisions. Our brains are constantly bombarded with information, and these shortcuts allow us to filter through it efficiently. It's like having a mental autopilot.
Ah, I see. So, it's like when you're driving home and suddenly realize you don't remember the last few turns you made. Your brain just handled it automatically.
Exactly. But the challenge is that these shortcuts can sometimes lead us astray. For instance, there's something called the confirmation bias, where we tend to favor information that confirms our existing beliefs and ignore what contradicts them.
Oh, like when you only read news articles that align with your political views? Guilty as charged.
Precisely. And that's why it's so important to be aware of these biases. They can impact everything from our personal relationships to major scientific research. By recognizing them, we can start to question our assumptions and make more informed decisions.
This is mind-blowing. It's like realizing there's a hidden layer to everything we think we know. So how do we start overcoming these biases?
All right, let's explore some specific types of cognitive biases that really shape our everyday decisions. First up is confirmation bias, which we've touched on a bit already. It's the tendency to search for, interpret, and remember information in a way that confirms our preconceptions.
So, it's like when I decide I want a new phone, and suddenly every ad I see seems to tell me that my choice is the best one?
Exactly. It's like having a spotlight that only highlights what you want to see. This bias can make us blind to evidence that contradicts our beliefs, which can be problematic in situations where objectivity is crucial.
Got it. What's next on the list?
Next, we have anchoring bias. This is where we rely too heavily on the first piece of information we receive. For example, if you're negotiating a salary and the first offer is lower than you expected, you might end up settling for less than you're worth because that initial number set the tone.
Oh, that makes sense. It's like when you see a shirt on sale for $50, and because it was originally $100, you think it's a great deal, even if it's still overpriced.
Exactly. That initial price acts as an anchor, influencing your perception of value. Then there's the halo effect, which is when our impression of one positive trait influences our perception of other traits. For instance, if someone is physically attractive, we might also assume they're more competent or kind.
So it's like when you meet someone who's really charming and you automatically think they're also super smart and talented, even if you don't have any evidence for that?
Yes, precisely. The halo effect can lead us to make snap judgments that aren't necessarily accurate. It's fascinating how these biases can subtly influence our thoughts and actions without us even realizing it.
This is so eye-opening. It's like our brains are playing tricks on us all the time. How do we even begin to counteract these biases?
Now let's shift our focus to how cognitive biases manifest in the workplace, particularly gender bias. This is a significant issue that affects workplace dynamics in profound ways. For instance, despite progress, women still hold a disproportionately small number of senior positions.
Right, I've read that in 2010, only about 15% of top positions in Fortune 500 companies were held by women. That's pretty shocking.
Exactly. And this disparity isn't just about numbers. Gender bias can influence perceptions of competence and leadership ability. For example, a woman might be seen as less authoritative than her male counterpart, even if she has the same qualifications and experience.
That's frustrating. And I guess it doesn't just stop at perceptions, right? It must affect things like salaries, too.
Absolutely. Gender bias contributes to salary disparities as well. Women often earn less than men for the same roles, and this gap widens when you consider factors like marital status. For instance, married women or mothers might face assumptions about their commitment to work, affecting their pay.
Wow, that's really unfair. It's like these biases are invisible barriers that hold people back.
Precisely. And it's not just gender. Biases can affect various demographics, impacting workplace participation and advancement opportunities. For instance, social desirability bias might lead employees to alter their behavior or responses in surveys to fit perceived norms, skewing data on workplace satisfaction or diversity.
So these biases are not just individual issues, but systemic ones that shape the whole work environment. How do companies even begin to address them?
Let's delve into implicit bias, particularly in the context of healthcare. Implicit bias refers to the unconscious attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions. Unlike explicit biases, which we are aware of, implicit biases operate without our conscious awareness.
So it's like having a hidden filter that colors how we see and interact with the world without us even realizing it.
Exactly. And in healthcare, these biases can have serious consequences. They can influence clinical decisions and contribute to health disparities. For instance, studies have shown that implicit biases can affect how pain is assessed and treated in patients of different racial backgrounds.
That's really concerning. Are there any examples of how this plays out in real-world scenarios?
Certainly. For example, research has found that Black patients are often undertreated for pain compared to white patients. This is partly due to implicit biases that might lead healthcare providers to underestimate the pain levels of Black patients.
Wow, that's a stark example. It really highlights how these unconscious biases can lead to unequal treatment.
Indeed. And it's not just about pain management. Implicit biases can affect various aspects of healthcare, from the time spent with patients to the types of treatments offered. This can lead to a lack of trust in the healthcare system among marginalized groups, exacerbating existing disparities.
It's like a domino effect where one bias can trigger a whole series of negative outcomes. How do healthcare providers become more aware of these biases?
Now that we've explored the impact of cognitive biases, let's talk about how we can overcome them. One effective strategy is to reflect on past decisions. By analyzing where biases may have influenced our choices, we can learn to recognize and counteract them in the future.
That makes sense. It's like reviewing game footage to improve your performance. You see what went wrong and figure out how to do better next time.
Exactly. Another important approach is to include external viewpoints. Consulting with others can provide fresh perspectives and help identify biases we might not see ourselves. It's like having a second pair of eyes to catch what you might miss.
So, kind of like getting a second opinion when you're unsure about something important. It makes a lot of sense.
Precisely. It's also crucial to challenge your own viewpoints actively. This means questioning your assumptions and being open to new information, even if it contradicts what you believe. It's about fostering a mindset of curiosity and learning.
I guess that can be tough, especially if you're really set in your ways. But it sounds like it's worth the effort.
Absolutely. Lastly, try to avoid making decisions under pressure. When we're rushed, we're more likely to rely on cognitive shortcuts, which can lead to biased decisions. Taking a step back to assess the situation can lead to more balanced outcomes.
So, it's about creating a space where you can think clearly and not just react. That sounds like a valuable practice, not just for avoiding biases, but for making better decisions overall.
Let's wrap up our discussion by exploring the role of technology and AI in understanding cognitive biases. With the advent of AI and big data, we have powerful tools at our disposal to analyze behavioral patterns and uncover biases that might otherwise go unnoticed.
That's fascinating. So AI can help us see patterns in our behavior that we might not be aware of, right?
Exactly. AI algorithms can process vast amounts of data to identify trends and biases in decision-making processes. For instance, they can analyze hiring practices to detect gender or racial biases that might be influencing outcomes.
That sounds incredibly useful. But I imagine there are some ethical concerns with using technology in this way.
Absolutely. One major concern is privacy. When collecting and analyzing data, it's crucial to ensure that individuals' personal information is protected and used responsibly. There's also the risk of AI systems perpetuating existing biases if they're trained on biased data.
So, if the data fed into the AI is biased, the AI could end up reinforcing those same biases. That's a bit worrying.
Precisely. That's why it's essential to approach AI with caution and ensure that there's transparency in how these systems are developed and used. It's about balancing the benefits of technology with the responsibility to use it ethically.
It sounds like a delicate balance, but if done right, AI could really help us understand and address biases more effectively.
Exactly. By leveraging technology thoughtfully, we can gain deeper insights into human behavior and work towards reducing biases in various domains. It's an exciting frontier, but one that requires careful consideration and ethical oversight.